All right. Hi, Jasmine.
Hello. Hi, Kay.
Hi. Thank you for being here today. We're going to be talking a little bit about Alligator Alcatraz from the herpetological perspective. Jasmine is a brilliant herpetologist and a great friend, so I am very excited to be talking to you today. Can you like talk about yourself a little bit? Let us know who you are, what you do.
Absolutely. My name is Jasmine Kesselring. I'm a graduate student at the University of South Florida, and I'm a student in the Conservation Biology Master's program there. My background is grounded in a lot of wildlife disease ecology. I have two bachelor's degrees, one in biology and one in biomedical sciences, where while getting those degrees, I really developed a passion for wildlife disease spread, and then also for herpetology, which is the study of reptiles and amphibians. So, right now, during my master's degree, I am studying invasive parasites in native Florida snakes. And I am also just taking the time during my degree to absorb as much disease ecology information as I can. It's a really niche area of study, and it really allows me the privilege of being able to spend a lot of time out in the field within all of Florida's really diverse and wide range of really exceptional, unique ecosystems. So I do work from the Panhandle down to the Everglades. And then, in addition to just my kind of career in academia, I'm also just a lifelong Floridian who's always kind of been an outdoorsy gal. And I've always been able to enjoy and respect the outdoors here. And so I've been able to visit the Everglades as well as all sorts of swampland out here in the nasty swamp that is Florida. All these years, I'm outside all the time.
That's awesome. That is super awesome. I love how niche the work is. I love niche work. You know how much I love niche
Yeah.
work. Um,
Oh,
cool beans. Do you have any like published works you want to plug?
I do. I just have one that just got approved, so it's not out yet, but it should be soon. And that'll be the impact of temperature on the reproductive development, body condition, and mortality of fall migrating monarch butterflies in a laboratory setting. And then I also had a publication come out a few months ago in March that I'm a co-author on, which is the rapid spread of the invasive pentastome Tiella orientalis in 14 new Florida counties and in pet trade snakes. And that is the invasive parasite I'm studying for my thesis work. And that publication is in collaboration with a lot of local scientists in Florida and the Southeast, specifically focusing on that parasite. So it's pretty cool to have such a big collaborative effort for that. And then I have a third paper that came out back in December, which is about body condition and longevity of dusky pygmy rattlesnakes in Florida, where I actually had the privilege of spotting and handling the largest pygmy rattlesnake ever recorded on record in the wild. So that is a publication talking about that and how it's important to weigh the have a bigger focus on the condition of wild animals when logging body condition versus captive animals.
Right. That's super awesome. Okay, let's dig into this a little bit. There's something pretty controversial happening right here in the state of Florida, within our Everglades in Big Cypress National Preserve, called Alligator Alcatraz. Something that our Attorney General James F. Meyer proposed and began work on, and the timeline has just been moving so quickly. There's new information out every single day, but not enough information, if I had to say so myself. And so I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit today about a different perspective when it comes to alligator Alcatraz and the possible ramifications of it, and approaching it from the environmental standpoint, which is why I think that you're a great person to talk to as somebody who works in the Everglades and has hands-on experience with the Everglades and just a big love for Florida. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Big Cypress National Preserve. I mentioned to you before, this is a little bit outside of my wheelhouse. I do know that Big Cypress is a swamp, essentially a year-round swamp. And so I kind of want to talk about that first, since that is where Alligator Alcatraz is currently placed. How do you think how do you think this facility will affect this specific area within the Everglades?
Absolutely. So, Big Cypress Preserve is a preserve, and it's titled that for a reason, and I'll get into that. But it contains a mixture of ecosystems. So, yes, it's a swamp, but it kind of has a mosaic of different types of swampy areas, which allows for a unique mosaic of both kind of tropical conditions and temperate conditions. And that allows the preserve to then support a really wide variety of plant and animal life. So, variety in habitat gives you variety in your flora and fauna as well. Now, like I said, Big Cypress is a preserve, and preserves are titled preserves because they're intended to protect and preserve natural resources, the flora, the fauna, and all the other resources found on that land. So areas like Big Cypress and Everglades National Park are home to some really fragile, really unique ecosystems that then house those specific highly endangered species, including, your iconic Florida panther. So unfortunately, kind of any degree of human disturbance or human involvement can place these delicate systems or species at risk. And because the Alligator Alcatraz is considerably large, I mean, 39 square miles of development, so that's a pretty considerably large area of human disturbance within the preserve.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I mean, and so many people within this facility as well. They were talking about. I mean, God, the numbers change every time I see them, I think. But originally it was 1,000 detainees that they were prepared for. Now they can house up to 3,000. Last time I checked, it's up to 5,000, and that doesn't even include the actual security on site or the miscellaneous employees that work there. So we're talking crazy amount of mileage as far as facility goes within a preserve, and then also thousands of people in this facility. So I can only imagine what kind of massive effect this is going to have on that area. Let's talk about the Everglades as a whole a little bit. What is the current standing health of the Everglades? How are we doing right now?
Um, Unfortunately, the I would say the current health of the Everglades and Big Cypress and that whole area down there is questionable at best. Unfortunately, Florida doesn't have a great track record with treating that area super well. We're still dealing with repercussions of development down there, trying to reroute water systems from like a decade ago. So we're still dealing with repercussions from that, and it is important to note that there are some restoration and preservation efforts in place. But ultimately, we're still juggling concerns around impacts of climate change, issues with water quality, and as you've likely probably seen in the media, especially regarding Burmese pythons. We're also worried about impacts of invasive species down there. Florida has more invasive reptiles and amphibians than anywhere in North America. I know it's not a big surprise because we're warm and humid down here, and the reptiles and the amphibians love that. So the Everglades and Big Cypress are full of invasive species, as well as those other issues I mentioned earlier.
Gotcha. Um, we talked. You brought up some of those endangered species. Would you say that we have a few species that are declining relatively rapidly?
Absolutely. And in regards to declining species specifically, we see declines of native species in the Everglades because right now there are 36 Florida native species that are federally listed as either endangered or threatened under the Endangered Species Act. That doesn't even include state listed species, but just federally 36 plants and animals that are listed. And some of those include that Florida panther I mentioned earlier, West Indian manatees, American crocodiles, and the eastern indigo snake, which is a personal favorite of mine. But that's just to name a few. And if you want the full complete list, it is on the National Park Service website. And you can see all of the federally listed species in the Everglades on the Everglades National Park tab on their website.
Gotcha. That's really good information. I'll make sure I plug that because I would also like to check that out.
Yeah.
And you did a pretty good job of talking about some of the things that lend to that declination of those numbers. So let's talk about the facility itself. Alligator Alcatraz is built upon an abandoned airport facility, essentially, a Dade Collier Training and Transitional Airport, or Transition Airport, I'm sorry. They halted construction on that back in the 70s because of some potential environmental concerns, and some pretty major ones. What do you think some of those concerns were, and do you think that those might still be concerns?
Absolutely. So I believe that the original construction was likely halted due to similar reasons why we tend to have issues with development in that area now, namely risks to native wildlife, as well as concerns regarding pollution from aircraft that were supposed to be flying in and out of there, as well as increased pollution from on-site vehicles that were going to be moving in and out. This was supposed to be one of the largest airports in America when it was originally began with construction. So that obviously halted construction due to those environmental concerns. And then also light and sound pollution is another thing that could have been an area of concern back then, but ultimately all those concerns are still pertinent now. Maybe not so much, fuel pollution from airplanes, because obviously they're not launching airplanes off of there, but ultimately vehicular pollution, as well as that same light and sound pollution, specifically the increased traffic of cars and buses and other vehicles on the roads surrounding the area is my biggest concern currently. So I mean, all of those old concerns, yes, are still potent now, but that one specifically would be what my opinion would be the biggest risk to the wildlife.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and I had read something relatively recently in the paper about how many vehicles are being moved in and out from Alligator Alcatraz, to the point where it's not even they're trying to make it so that it's not even just ICE that is transporting these detainees, and trying to bring in some of the local police force to do that too. So that's definitely concerning, for sure. Do you have any concerns in regards to Alligator Alcatraz for like specific species?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, and concerning alligator Alcatraz and vulnerable native species, the most obvious species I think everyone is going to think about is that Florida panther. As of 2024, it was deemed that there were close to maybe 200-ish panthers in the wild left, which is a very, very small number. And last year, FWC reported 36 panther deaths, with the majority of them having been killed as a result of vehicle collision on the roads. So the new traffic caused by alligator Alcatraz's presence will absolutely be increasing the risk of panther deaths caused by vehicles. And this doesn't go just for the Florida panther, it goes for all wildlife in the area. I mean, in my time as a field technician in the Everglades, I've seen plenty of roadkill. I've seen roadkill birds, snakes, lizards, small mammals, all inside the roads inside the national park. And that doesn't even include what might be hit on local roads nearby or high-speed highways in the area. So essentially, the more vehicles you have coming through that area, the more animals they're going to get hit. And unfortunately, sometimes that's just something that's unavoidable. So it's kind of hard to have a small environmental impact when you're statistically increasing the chances of a collision there. But vehicle collision and the general just increased presence of humans in the area is what I believe will likely pose the greatest risk to wildlife.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is something I was curious about when I first heard this statement. James Uffmeyer, when originally talking about this project, kind of in a passive, lighthearted way, had mentioned that it was not within detainees' best interest to try to leave the facility, because they would be met with alligators and pythons. How big of a threat do those species actually pose to people trying to leave this facility? And what do you, I honestly, I kind of just want to know, like, what your thoughts are in that, like, on that statement in general.
Yeah, so this comment, I heard this when it was put out in the media, and I found it to be quite comical, because this is my kind of my area of expertise, which is reptile science and disease. So I have some knowledge of snake and crocodilian behaviors, and I want to be clear. Snakes and alligators are not inherently aggressive towards humans. They will defend themselves if they feel threatened with humans, but in general, the risks to humans in the area because of quote, pythons and alligators is minimal. I've handled snakes in the Everglades under permitted research, and the first thing that they usually do is take off in the other direction when you encounter them. The same goes for gators. If you're lucky, maybe you'll encounter a braver gator who will just sit there when you walk or bike by, but for the most part, they move out of your way. I have videos of it. Usually, while on those research trips, yeah, we'll encounter big gators on the trail, and they'll see us, and they're kind of annoyed that we've interrupted their day, and they just get up and go somewhere else.
Right.
But the truth is, these animals are shy. They're non-confrontational. Despite what media and pop culture might tell you, they are not an inherent danger to humans, and they don't gain anything from chasing down humans or biting a human. Because realistically, these animals cannot eat a human. They do not want to eat a human, even if they could. And in order to do so, they'd be wasting copious amounts of energy, which they would rather use. Mating, catching actual prey that they can eat, or even just trying to survive the increased presence of humans in their area. Ultimately, I mean, to threaten people with pythons is kind of silly, as these pythons are non-venomous. So if you bite one, yeah, it might hurt a little bit, but other than that, you wash it with soap and water, and your day goes on. And like I said, gators aren't exactly confrontational either for the most part. If you leave them alone, they will leave you alone. Honestly, the biting insects in the area, I would deem to be more cause of frustration or risk for people out there than any of those large reptiles.
Gotcha. Super insightful. Let's talk about those bugs for a second. Just because I'm curious. What are some of the concerns surrounding the bugs?
Yeah, I've been out there. I've been out in the Everglades during summertime, and the last time I was out there during the summer, I stopped counting my mosquito bites after 300. So hundreds and hundreds of bites. And I want to be clear, you have mosquitoes, you have deer flies, lots of biting insects down there. And the biggest concern is disease transmission. It's not the most prevalent thing here in the United States, but it does happen. Obviously, we're worried about disease transmission from any of those blood feeding insects.
Right. Yeah, that's something I hadn't even thought about. And with that influx of people, and the presence of bugs, and the fact that the vast majority of this facility is outdoors, can assure us that the mosquitoes are going to be getting into people's business, and God forbid, anybody is sick, that can be transferred through those bugs. Hadn't even thought about that. Um, let's get crazy for a second. Let's get crazy. Let's get wild, and let's have a hypothetical moment here. Um, what are the potential issues of a gator or a python getting into it with a person, consuming a person?
Yeah, I mean, in order to consume a human being, these animals have to be absolutely massive. And you will see a lot of influencers or media tell you, oh, the pythons, they're 20 feet long. Even a 20-foot long python is probably not going to choose to eat a human. Gators also are not exactly people eaters. The few instances of attacks with gators typically involve nesting defense and stuff like that. And ultimately, let's say worst case scenario, someone is like that unlucky 1% that ends up having to duke it out with a gator. Obviously, there are some serious risks. I mean, these are strong animals. It's just a tube of muscle. Insane bite force on these animals, and you can die from gator attacks. So that, I mean, a warning is certainly do for sure. Like I completely understand wanting to say, hey, there are gators and also crocodiles in this area, and they are large and they are dangerous. This is true. But generally, I feel like you really have to put a lot of pressure on these animals to exhibit um, a confrontational response from them.
Gotcha. So it's really safe to say that these animals do not pose the risk at the level that maybe our attorney general is claiming or talking about.
Absolutely. His threat of pythons and gators being extra dangerous to people if they were to leave the facility is conflated. It's not as serious as it sounds. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the tourism and visitation to the Everglades that we do every single year. They take field trips to the Everglades with children. So
Yeah.
I think if it
Yes.
was really such an intense threat, I that wouldn't be the case.
Right. Excellent point. Excellent point. Let's get into waste a little bit. Let's get into human waste a little bit. So, one of my biggest concerns when I first heard about alligator alcatraz, my brain almost immediately went to where where is human waste gonna go? Because you're in the middle of the Everglades, and there are thousands of people being held on this outdoor facility, this outdoor site. Where is human waste going to go? The most I could find about what they're doing with waste is they are pumping it into 22,000 gallon frac tanks that they are claiming are operating at 50% capacity, and they're supposed to be pumped every day. I they I, they say that they say that this process allows for zero room for environmental impact. How do you feel about that statement? Does it ring true?
So let's say that they are being truthful and accurate as to how these things are functioning and that they truly are only functioning at 50% capacity. Um, there are certainly worse alternatives to that system, such as just dumping waste outside. There are certainly worse options, but there is no true way for this facility and this waste procedure to truly have, quote, zero environmental impact. It is not possible. Because ultimately, let's say once the waste is removed from the tank, or that the tank itself has to be relocated to then drop the waste outside of the preserve, it still has to be transported. It has to be transported in some kind of vehicle, which still results in gas emissions as well as increased wildlife vehicle collision, like I mentioned earlier. And ultimately, let's say the waste doesn't directly affect the ecosystems in Big Cypress or the Everglades. It still has to go somewhere, and it's just going to negatively affect whatever environment or facility it goes to elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And like in my head too. I mean, like I'm not an expert at waste pumping or frac tanks, or but I can imagine a human error. There's always going to be an inevitable mistake somehow in some way, and I can imagine some splashage or some, you never know. And so I
Right.
was just I was curious about that statement. I thought that was very interesting. Um,
Yeah.
just
Also, in those cases where you have the splashes, say that there is an error with pumping or moving the tanks and there is spillage of sewage, you again then increase risk of disease transmission, especially if you have a lot of people in close quarters. Um, your chance of disease transmission, especially through feces, is high.
Yeah, valid point. And like even you with the way that the world works, you get that seepage, you get that splashage, and it ends up somewhere else within the ecosystem for another species of some kind to consume or bathe in.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah,
Potentially, if it goes to like a treatment plant, there are still environmental consequences of those. Again, still better than just dumping it outside in a waterway somewhere. But ultimately, to claim zero environmental impact is just fundamentally incorrect.
gotcha. Okay. On the topic of tanks, they have 6,000 gallon tanks of potable water on site. They claim that these tanks are flushed and sanitized regularly. Regularly is the most specific thing I could find. I could not find any actual real specific, like we are cleaning it this many times a day. It's fine. However, when I was kind of looking into how these tanks are sanitized and how they're flushed, the vast majority of information that I saw was the utilization of like a diluted bleach. I wanted to ask you about using something like that in this ecosystem.
Absolutely. So, unfortunately, it is possible for disinfectant solutions such as bleach, even if it is diluted, to negatively impact the environment. Because the chlorine compounds found in bleach can be fatal to plants released if it's released into the soil. Additionally, those compounds might have adverse effects on beneficial microorganisms or zooplankton if it ends up released into local waterways. And ultimately, it just has the potential to really disrupt the health of the food webs in those South Florida ecosystems if it ends up out there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Just it's not a single short answer to any of these. It's everything. Everything is everything. I feel like this is a really, really good example of that. Last time I looked, there was some pretty active technology on this site, which is I feel like a given considering what this facility. Like the purpose this facility serves. 200 plus security cameras, and then on top of it, we have 28,000 feet of barbed wire. And that's just like me going back for a second to that technology stuff. That's just the security cameras. I don't know what other kinds of technology they are using in this facility. I'm sure we can use our wildest imagination, and we'd probably be pretty on point with that. But I kind of want to know your thoughts on like the usage of that kind of stuff there, as well as the barbed wire fencing, like what kind of possible problems that could cause.
So the camera themselves don't concern me too much. I don't believe that their impact is majorly prevalent. What does concern me is that massive barbed wire fence. Because it's really not uncommon. You see this a lot with a lot of animal like rehabilitation centers. They will often post to avoid using barbed wire fencing or razor wire fencing because birds and other wildlife very commonly become ensnared in it. Or sometimes they even will impale themselves on it. And when this happens, those animals, if they're not rescued, they can just remain stuck there and they will suffer and die on those fences. Even if they can be rescued and removed from barbed wire fences, sometimes their injuries are just so extensive that euthanasia ends up being the only alternative for those animals. Additionally, large fences, especially really tall or really widespread fences, can prevent migrating species from utilizing their usual routes. So some species may not be able to get over the fence. Burrowing species may not be able to get under the fence, or if it spans too far, they may not be able to get around it. So it can really halt the migration of like hoofstock species, like some of our deer down there, or other migrating birds, or even migrating insects. Sometimes we forget about them too. But these are all animals that could be put at risk by such a large barbed wire fence.
Wow. Okay. Let's talk about that butterfly effect a little bit. That's a lot. Are there any species of birds in specific that you're concerned about with this barbed wire fence?
I'm not a bird
Person.
expert, unfortunately, so I'm not sure. I do know that Florida is home to migrating species of birds, and I don't want to list the species and misspeak, but I do know we have migrating species of birds, we have migrating species of insects here, and they definitely could absolutely be put at risk in areas like South Florida and where Alligator Alcatraz is based right now. So if they were to continue using such a large barbed wire fence, I definitely would be concerned about even a non-migrating bird species, just local birds down there. seafarer, sea fowl, other things like that could absolutely be tangled in a
Gotcha.
fence.
Okay. What are some of the possible issues that the lack of migration could cause for some of these species? What does that look like?
Right, right. So animals migrate for a reason. They usually have kind of like a geographic spot where they mate, where they go to overwinter. So my most of my knowledge when it comes to migrating species is surrounding monarch butterflies. This is a study that I was a part of during my undergrad. And monarch butterflies spend their warmer months in North America and then go to overwinter in Mexico, which have those stunning videos you see of just thousands and thousands of monarchs on trees, and you can hear their wings beating because there's just so many of them. So that's a great example of a migrating species. If monarch butterflies cannot make it to Mexico to overwinter, you may see die-offs of populations who are not able to survive winter conditions elsewhere in North America. Now, Florida is kind of one of those special cases where it stays warm enough here, where sometimes everything's chill, and they don't always need to migrate here. But that's just an example. So that is the concept of migration, and that applies to birds and other migrating terrestrial species as well. So if we are unable to see migration, they may not be able to reproduce appropriately. They may not survive the weather conditions that they get stuck in if they're unable to move and they get stuck at the fence. So while I definitely think some species could absolutely still migrate around that fence because it is in a centralized area there, I definitely think that a few unfortunate individuals are going to become stuck.
Okay, I gotcha. You had brought up light pollution earlier, and that was also something that I had thought about. Because when you grow up in Florida and you grow up in the beaches, growing up in Fort Myers, like 20 minutes away from Sanibel and Fort Myers Beach, you're often told to watch your light pollution on the beaches, especially at night, especially because we've got turtles, and so I kind of wanted to ask you about whether or not you have some concerns about the light pollution aspect of this place. And it was confirmed through a picture miles away from the facility that there is a massive amount of light pollution radiating from this place that you can see visibly from many miles away. And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And I saw the same picture. And also concerningly, I've heard reports from some of the representatives that got to visit the facility recently that those lights are left on all night. So even in dark conditions outside, we have the facility still lighting up the sky. And what's really concerning is that Big Cypress National Preserve and Everglades National Park are actually designated recognized international dark sky locations. So those are areas where we're supposed to be able to see stars and have there's just less development in those areas because they are wildlife preserves or national parks. So it allows us to really pull back on the light pollution and be able to enjoy the night sky as it is supposed to be enjoyed. However, light pollution is oftentimes a forgotten consequence of human development. And I know that, like we were talking about earlier, many of the officials involved in the construction and implementation of Alligator Alcatraz really attempted to sell us all on the fact that it wouldn't be too environmentally significant because, oh, we're putting it on a previous construction site, so we're not, leveling anything new. We're just using pavement that's already there. But even if you ignore everything we already discussed today, light pollution is still something that we have to think about. Like I said, Big Cypress is an international dark sky location, so excessive artificial light can repel wildlife away from their natural habitat or attract species to that area that they're not supposed to be in. It also might disrupt natural light patterns that the local flora and fauna are used to. And one great example of this, which I was just talking about, is the monarch butterfly. And during my undergraduate degree, when I was working with these animals in the lab, it was really, really easy to see how easily attracted these butterflies are to bright artificial light. In fact, we used it as a tool in order, we had them in incubators. We would use the bright artificial light to attract them away from the door so we wouldn't lose butterflies in the lab. And they absolutely will migrate towards light. And this goes for other lepidopteran species, so butterflies and moths, other insects, and obviously you talked about turtles. I don't believe that this facility is in a location where it would affect turtles too much, but that is an example of a species that is absolutely affected by light pollution, as they are supposed to follow moonlight in order to make it to the sea when they hatch. So this is just examples of how other animals could be affected as well.
Right. For sure. I mean, it's literally just this massive beacon right in the middle of nowhere. What are some of your concerns with the idea of, like, let's use the monarchs as an example, with them migrating to that specific area?
Right. So even, and I say the term migrate loosely. I don't mean like their actual large geographic
Right.
migration. I just mean that their movement in that general area. So let's say you're a monarch butterfly and you call Big Cypress your home, and you have this giant light on at night, and you're thinking that's where I'm supposed to go because that's how you're biologically engineered. You're going to have monarch butterflies ending up on this facility where there's no pollinator plants for them to lay their eggs or to feed on, and ultimately they're just going to end up smacking the light for however many hours at night, and they will run right into it, and they can damage their wings, they can damage other body parts, and so it does risk injuring wildlife or killing wildlife, just due to the fact that the lights are on at night. Also, the sun is out all day cooking us in that infamous Florida heat, and then we have these lights on at night. So these animals might not get a true sense of nighttime if they are in the direct area surrounding the facility. So if we take away these animals' nighttime, they may start to push away from the light at night, which then kind of causes this diversity desert of sorts where we push the biodiversity away, because they're migrating away from the light. So it ends up being a form of habitat destruction, even if you don't cut down any trees, even if you don't pump chemicals into the environment. You're essentially ruining these animals' habitats. They can't exist there if they can't have some sort of circadian rhythm, just like we do.
Right. For sure. And you see that all the time everywhere now anyway, with all of the construction that's happening, and houses and homing just popping up in random places, and humans aren't the best at integrating the species and the animals that we tend to devastate. You see that all the time with bigger animals, and like bears, and when we tend to be like, what the heck? There are bears in our neighborhood. What's that about? Well,
In the Bears neighborhood, actually.
yeah, exactly. Actually, we're in their home, believe it or not. Okay, so I feel like that covers a lot of area, a lot of ground. Do you have any final thoughts? And my last question to you truly is, do you, as a scientist and as an environmentalist, do you believe that environmentalists reserve the right to be as upset about this facility being built as they are?
Right. So my thoughts on Alligator Alcatraz overall are that this facility absolutely poses a major threat to local ecosystems, both in the short term and the long term. Outside of the facility's glaring human rights concerns, we see added environmental pressures on the plants, the animals, the water quality, and these negative effects can indirectly turn around and also begin to affect local Florida residents in the area. And regardless, either way, our natural lands and the wildlife that inhabit them are intrinsically valuable on their own. And these precious lands were here before us, and they have the right to remain existing the way they have for thousands of years without the stain of human development and conflicts continuing to destroy what little of them we have left. So really, As a lifelong Floridian, as a scientist, and as someone who really cares about the environment, really my final thoughts are to not give up, to continue to email and call your representatives, calling the governor, calling the attorney general, to continue protesting. And the preservation of our natural lands is actually a bipartisan issue that many of us agree on across the political aisle. And we have the power, we the people, we have power to halt further progress on developments like Alligator Alcatraz. And the alligators that this facility was named after deserve better than this, and so do the ecosystems that they inhabit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here today. This was really insightful, and I hope those who watch this video get something out of it, because I know I certainly did. Thank you so much for talking to me today and answering my questions. And I think, there are so many facets, so many branches of why this construction is wrong. But you're absolutely right in saying that something so many Floridians can agree on, regardless of their political stance, is the maintenance of our natural habitats and our natural ecosystems. And approaching it from the environmental standpoint, I think for a lot of people is the best bet of getting through to them in some way, shape, or form, unfortunately. But I thought to myself, who better to talk to than you about the environmental standpoint? But thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate you.
So much for asking me to chat about it. It's something I've been paying close attention to as well, and something that I'm passionate about. And the Everglades are 1000% unique. There is literally no place on earth like it. The first time I went, my breath was taken away, and I love going, even with all the bugs and all the alligators and the pythons. Although that's kind of the reason why I'm there. But ultimately, it's a beautiful place, and I really just don't think that it's the home for a facility like this, and that we need to preserve the integrity of those lands. And Floridians like having them there. We like our natural lands, and we want to keep them that way. And we already have a lot of development going on in Florida, and I don't think we need to add to the strain that we've already got.
Yeah, I agree. Human beings leave really big footprints all the time, everywhere. It would be nice to care a little bit more about what we're doing.
And a big example a lot of people say is that it doesn't take a lot of time to destroy a habitat, but it can take decades or longer to restore it. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? That's a great point. And I guess I have one final question for you then, to that. Alligator Alcatraz has been there for a short period of time. We know that they announced it almost at the end of last month, and it's already operational. With the short amount of time that this has been in operation, how long do you think it'll take to restore, or even begin to attempt to restore, the surrounding area?
I think it's hard to say, because obviously I haven't had like boots on the ground out there, and I can't see with my own eyes, physically there, what has been changed. But I do know that any trees or flora that they have cleared can take a long time to recover, especially if they've been completely removed. Those areas would have to be reseeded, replanted, and restored. It can take a really long time to grow trees back, decades of tree growth. But unfortunately, I don't know exactly how much of that was removed, in order to get this facility up and running. But I do think that it hasn't been there that long, and I think that the strain on the environment could be really reduced if we could get it shut down or moved elsewhere, as soon as possible. And that environment could recover quicker the sooner that a facility like that is removed. Although personally, I don't think there's a need for this facility anywhere in Florida right now. That's just my personal opinion. But in terms of environmental standpoint, the quicker we can get that out of there, the quicker the environment can recover.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to hear it from you. But alrighty. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share before we close this Zoom meeting?
No, I think that that does it in terms of my knowledge and my opinions.
Awesome.
But if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm still a student myself, and I'm always still learning. So if anyone has any pointers they want to add, I'd love to hear them as well.
Gotcha. Is there a way that you would prefer for people to reach you so I can?
Um, they can reach out to me on Instagram or they can email me at my graduate student email, which is on the USF website. If they want to look up the my email there, they can find it there.
Gotcha. Alrighty. Thank you very much, Jasmine. This is Jasmine Kesselring. She has been fantastic. You've been great. Thank you so much for being here, and I will talk to you soon. Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Bye. You too. All right. Um. So all of those things. Let's see. Let's start this. I don't know if this is gonna work. I'm new to this. This is new to me. Jasmine was a great person to talk to about this because, as I said earlier, there are so many reasons why this facility should not exist. And unfortunately, not everybody cares about the absurd human rights violations that this place just inevitably and inherently has and does, and so unfortunately, I think for a lot of people, approaching it from the environmental standpoint is the way to go, especially being a Floridian and being in Florida, and knowing how red this state is, and a lot of the ideologies of many Floridians. There is one thing that a lot of us can agree on, especially native Floridians, regardless of political affiliation, are in our natural habitats, our local environments, and there are a few reasons even within that, whether you want to preserve our natural habitats because you genuinely care for the environment and you grew up in Florida and you love the beauty of this state, or because you value their monetary contribution to the state, regardless of your feelings about why this facility should not exist where it does, there are reasons for everybody. I think to be able to come together and say, hey, this is not good. For lack of better words, this is bad, actually, for many different reasons. And so I want to thank Jasmine again for being here today. Very insightful, and I just think we need to be reminded how large scale this facility is, and how large scale the potential ramifications of this facility are. We'll never truly know, unfortunately, the entirety of the consequences for this place. And for me personally, that is a big enough reason to say maybe not. But unfortunately, that is not where we're at politically, and that's not something at the forefront of our minds. And Jasmine is absolutely correct. If this does not appeal to you, if you do not believe that this site should be where it is or exist at all, but we're talking strictly environmental right now. If you do not believe that this place should exist where it does, you have more power than you think to stop it. You have more power than you think to stop it. Please continue to reach out to Florida government. Even if you don't live here, I highly encourage, especially, to my friends in different states, New York, up north, wherever they are, you also have power, to say, hey, I see what's going on down in Florida, and I'm a little concerned about it. There are so many reasons. There are so many reasons why I personally am concerned about this place. But as a Floridian, born and raised, have been here my entire life, and I grew up. I grew up 20 minutes away from the beaches, and grew up in an area of Florida that really highly valued its wildlife and its natural habitats. It's just it's hard to see this happening in your backyard and not want to do something about it. It's pretty devastating. The fact that they took less than 2 weeks to start putting people on this facility site is really wild to me, and allows for absolutely no time to do actual, real, consolidated research on the consequences of those actions, which proves to me, amongst many other things, that was never a goal of theirs, and that they don't actually care about the issues that this facility is going to cause. So thank you guys for watching and listening. I hope that you are able to take something from this. I know I told Jasmine, and I mean it, so many things that I hadn't even thought about. And that is why it is so important to do research and to talk to people who know what they're talking about, because you can sit there and say to yourself, well, I know this and I feel this way, but at the end of the day, your knowledge is vastly limited, extraordinarily limited. I consider myself to be pretty well-rounded on the subject of politics, and especially right now, Alligator Alcatraz, but you could not put a microphone up to my face and ask me any of the questions that Jasmine and I just talked about, and it is because she is an expert and a professional in her field. You have to do real research, you have to talk to the right people, and you have to have an open mind, right? Not doing those things is a major part of why we're at where we're at right now. Information is dangerous, right? Information is scary and dangerous, and there is a reason why there is a huge war on education and receiving valid information, and I'm sure we all know what that is. So please do your due diligence to not fall into that trap, I guess, regardless of what your political views are. I think it's pretty evident that this facility, Alligator Alcatraz, is abhorrent for several different reasons, and we should be a lot more concerned than we are, for sure. But thank you everybody for paying attention. I'm gonna put a few links in the caption, description. I don't wherever this is posted, I'm gonna post some links and some resources, so you can check those out. And as Jasmine said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to her on the USF website. Thank you. Peace out.